May had never planned to attend the charity concert that evening. The 22-year-old nursing student was only there because her roommate Lily had caught a bad cold and given her the ticket. "Don't waste it," Lily had insisted between sneezes. "It cost me $40. So here she was, feeling completely out of place in her simple blue dress and worn sneakers. Everyone else looked like they belonged in a fancy magazine, with their glittering jewelry and perfectly styled hair. May tugged nervously at the hem of her dress as an usher guided her to a seat in the third row. "Enjoy the performance," the usher said with a practiced smile before moving on to help the next guest, the concert. Hall was the grandest place May had ever been. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. Red velvet covered the seats and golden details decorated the walls. She felt like she'd walked into another world, one where people like her, who worked night shifts at the local hospital to pay for textbooks, didn't belong. May glanced down at her program. The headliner was Anton Rivera, a famous concert pianist known worldwide for his incredible talent and, according to Lily, his charming personality. His photo showed a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to look right through you. "I should have given the ticket to someone who actually appreciates classical music," May thought as she scanned the crowded hall. Her own musical experience was limited to singing in the shower and occasionally picking out simple tunes on her grandmother's old piano before it was sold to pay for her first semester of college. The lights dimmed and the audience quieted down. A spotlight illuminated the magnificent grand piano center stage, its polished surface gleaming like black water. The host, a tall woman in a sequined gown, welcomed everyone and thanked the sponsors before introducing Anton Rivera. The crowd erupted in enthusiastic applause as Rivera walked onto the stage. He moved with confidence, acknowledging the audience with a small bow before taking his seat at the piano. Without any sheet music, he launched into his first piece, something fast and complicated that made May's eyes widen as his fingers flew across the keys. As he played, May found herself drawn in despite her initial disinterest. There was something hypnotic about watching someone so completely in their element. Rivera's face transformed as he played, sometimes furrowing his brow in concentration, other times smiling slightly as if sharing a private joke with the piano. After 3 pieces and standing ovations for each one, Rivera stood and addressed the audience for the first time. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent that May couldn't quite place. "As some of you regular attendees know, I like to do something a little different during my performances." A murmur of excitement rippled through the audience. May noticed several people nudging each other and whispering behind their programs. "Music is not meant to be locked away in concert halls and conservatories," Rivera continued. "It belongs to everyone. Yet many people believe they could never play because they haven't studied for decades as I have." He gestured to the piano behind him. "So each night I invite someone from the audience to join me on stage, to show how approachable and yet how complex this beautiful instrument can be." May relaxed in her seat. This had nothing to do with her. She watched as Rivera scanned the crowd, his eyes moving slowly over the faces turned expectantly toward him. What the audience didn't realize was that these volunteers were usually arranged beforehand, music students or amateur pianists planted in the crowd to create an entertaining moment that seemed spontaneous, but tonight was different. Rivera's planned volunteer, a conservatory student, had texted just before the show to say they were stuck in traffic and wouldn't make it in time. Now he needed to find someone else quickly. His gaze continued to move across the crowd until suddenly it stopped. On May, something about her caught his attention. Maybe it was how she sat slightly forward in her seat, or the way her eyes had followed his hands during the performance instead of his face. Whatever it was, Rivera made a split-second decision. "You there," he said, pointing directly at May. "In the blue dress in the third row. Would you honor us by joining me on stage?" A spotlight swung around and found her. May froze as hundreds of faces turned to look at her. Her heart hammered against her ribs and her mouth went dry. She shook her head slightly, hoping he would move on and pick someone else. He didn't. "Don't be shy," Rivera encouraged, smiling warmly. "I promise I won't bite." People around May began to applaud, some turning in their seats to urge her forward. An older woman behind her patted her shoulder. "Go on, dear," she whispered. "It'll be fun." Trapped by politeness and the expectant stares, May slowly rose from her seat. Her legs felt wobbly as she made her way to the aisle, An usher appeared to guide her to a small set of stairs leading up to the stage. With each step toward Rivera and the gleaming piano, May's embarrassment grew. Her cheeks burned and she kept her eyes fixed on the floor. The spotlights were hot and blinding. The walk felt like it took forever. "Welcome," Rivera said when she finally reached him. Up close, he was taller than she expected. His eyes were kind but also calculating, assessing her. He held out his hand and she shook it automatically. "What's your name?" "May," she managed to say into the microphone he held toward her. Her voice echoed through the hall, sounding small and uncertain. "May," he repeated with a smile. "A beautiful name. Have you ever played the piano before, May?" She hesitated. Would it be worse to say no and seem completely clueless, or to say yes and create expectations she couldn't meet? "A little," she finally admitted, her voice barely audible despite the microphone. A gentle laugh rippled through the audience, and May's embarrassment deepened. They all thought this was going to be amusing, watching this ordinary girl fumble at the keys while the master looked on. Rivera nodded and turned to address the audience again. "I often do this to demonstrate how the seemingly simple act of playing requires years of dedicated practice." He gestured to the piano bench. "Please have a seat." May perched nervously on the edge of the bench, her posture stiff and uncomfortable. The keys before her seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions. She placed her hands in her lap, afraid to touch anything. "Relax," Rivera said quietly, just for her, then louder for the audience. "I'll play something brief and then May will try to repeat it. Just a few notes." He sat beside her on the bench, leaving enough space between them to be respectful but close enough that she could see exactly what he was doing. The audience watched in anticipation as Rivera positioned his right hand over the keys. With fluid grace, he played a sequence of 8 notes, a beautiful, haunting melody that May recognized immediately. It was from a piece her grandmother used to play on their old upright piano, something by Chopin. The notes hung in the air like delicate crystal. May knew Rivera had chosen this particular sequence carefully. Simple, enough to seem achievable but complex. Enough in its timing and expression that most beginners would fail completely at reproducing it. "Now you try," Rivera said, sliding his hand away from the keys and nodding encouragingly at May. The entire hall fell silent. May could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. She looked down at the keyboard, then at the audience, a sea of expectant faces waiting for her to embarrass herself. But as her eyes returned to the keys, something strange happened. The nervousness began to fade, replaced by a distant memory. Sitting beside her grandmother as a child, watching those wrinkled hands move across the keys of their old piano, creating magic. May positioned her fingers over the exact keys Rivera had played. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. "Just like Grandma showed me," she thought. And then she played. The first note hung in the air, perfect and clear. Then another followed and another until May had replayed Rivera's 8-note sequence exactly as he had performed it. But she didn't stop there. Her fingers continued to move across the keys, flowing naturally into the next passage of the Chopin Nocturne. The melody poured out of her as if she'd been playing it her entire life. Each note connected to the next with a grace that belied her lack of formal training. Rivera stepped back, his expression changing from polite amusement to genuine surprise. He had expected fumbling, perhaps a halting attempt at copying his demonstration. Instead, he watched as this nursing student with worn sneakers played with the kind of emotional understanding that couldn't be taught. The audience, who had been prepared to chuckle good-naturedly at an amateur's attempt, now sat in stunned silence. Many leaned forward in their seats, trying to get a better look at the young woman who had transformed before their eyes. May was no longer aware of them. The hot spotlight, the hundreds of watching eyes, even Rivera himself, all faded away as she surrendered to the music. Her body swayed slightly with the rhythm, and her face relaxed into an expression of pure joy. She wasn't playing perfectly. Her technique lacked the refinement that years of professional training would have provided. Sometimes her fingers stumbled over the more complex passages, and her timing occasionally wavered. But there was something in her playing that transcended technical precision, a raw emotional honesty that professional musicians often spent years trying to recapture. As she finished the passage, May slowly opened her eyes, looking almost surprised to find herself on stage. The final notes echoed through the hall, followed by a moment of complete silence. Then the audience erupted. The applause started slowly, Scattered at first, then building into a thunderous wave that washed over her, people rose to their feet, some calling out words of praise that were lost in the general noise. An older man in the front row wiped tears from his eyes. Rivera stood motionless, his hands hanging at his sides, momentarily forgotten by the audience. He had hosted this segment in hundreds of concerts, but never had it gone like this. Never had his carefully crafted moment of instruction been so thoroughly hijacked by genuine, unexpected talent. When the applause finally died down, Rivera approached the microphone again. His voice, when he spoke, carried a new note of respect. "I think," he said, smiling at May, "that I may have chosen the wrong career path. Perhaps I should become a talent scout instead." The audience laughed appreciatively. "Tell us, May, where did you study?" May's face flushed again, but this time not from embarrassment. "I've never had lessons," she admitted, her voice stronger now but still soft. "Not really." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the crowd. "But you just played Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major," Rivera said, his eyebrows raised. "Not just the part I played, but the continuation." Without sheet music, May nodded, looking down at the keys. "My grandmother had a piano when I was growing up. She played that piece a lot." She ran her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them down. "After she died when I was 7, I would visit her empty house. Her piano was still there for a while, and I would try to play the songs I remembered her playing." Rivera nodded encouragingly. "You taught yourself by ear?" "I guess so," May said. "I would listen to her old records and try to match the sounds. I don't know how to read music or anything." The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word of this unexpected exchange. "Would you play something else for us?" Rivera asked. It wasn't what he had planned for this segment of the concert. He was supposed to thank the volunteer and send them back to their seat after the brief demonstration. But nothing about this interaction was following the script. May hesitated. "I don't know if I should. I'm not very good." A woman from the audience called out, "Yes, you are." Others joined in with encouraging words and applause. Rivera held up his hands for quiet. "I've been playing piano for over 40 years, he told May. "I've performed in the greatest concert halls around the world. And I'm telling you that what you just did was remarkable." He gestured to the keyboard. "Please play something else. Whatever comes to mind." May took a deep breath. Her grandmother had loved so many pieces. In her mind, she could still hear the scratchy recordings playing on the old record player. Could still see her grandmother's hands dancing over the keys of the upright piano that had eventually been sold to help pay for May's college tuition. She placed her hands on the keys again and began to play the opening notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune. The piece started softly, delicately, like moonlight filtering through leaves. As May played, the technical imperfections in her performance were overshadowed by the emotional depth she brought to the music. Rivera watched her hands with fascination. Her fingering was all wrong. No teacher would have allowed her to play this way, reaching awkwardly for certain notes, using the wrong fingers for particular passages. And yet the music she produced was deeply moving. He found himself holding his breath during the quieter sections, caught up in her interpretation despite himself. In the audience, phones were raised to record this unexpected moment. A critic from the local newspaper was frantically taking notes. A talent scout for the State Symphony, who had come to evaluate Rivera's performance, was already drafting an email to her boss. When May finished, the applause was immediate and overwhelming. Rivera himself joined in, clapping with genuine enthusiasm. When the noise finally subsided, he turned to her with new respect in his eyes. "May I ask you something that might seem strange?" he said. May nodded cautiously. "If I play something you've never heard before, something original, would you try to repeat it?" May bit her lip but nodded again. "I can try." Rivera sat down at the piano and thought for a moment. Then he played a complex sequence, about 20 notes in an unusual modern-sounding progression that he'd been working on for a new composition. It wasn't classical. It had elements of jazz and contemporary music woven through it. When he finished, he looked at May expectantly. She had been watching his hands intently, her eyes following each movement. Now she positioned her own hands and began to play. The sequence came out almost perfectly. There were 2 notes she missed, playing slightly sharp where Rivera had played natural, but the rhythm and feeling were intact. The audience gasped collectively. Rivera played another sequence, this one even more complex. Again, May reproduced it with only minor deviations. He tried a third time, adding subtle dynamic changes, playing some notes more forcefully than others, some with a feather-light touch. May's reproduction wasn't just mechanically accurate. She captured the emotional nuances as well. It was as if she could hear not just the notes but the intention behind them. Rivera turned to face the audience, his expression one of delighted disbelief. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I believe we are witnessing something extraordinary tonight." He turned back to May. "You have what musicians call perfect pitch, the ability to identify or reproduce any note by ear, but you also have something much rarer, an innate understanding of musical structure and emotion." May looked overwhelmed. This evening had taken a turn she could never have imagined when she reluctantly took her roommate's concert ticket. "I have a proposal," Rivera continued. "The second half of tonight's program includes Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Would you join me on stage again after the intermission?" "We could play it as a duet." May's eyes widened. "I don't think I know that one well enough," she stammered. "You don't need to," Rivera assured her. "I'll play it once and you can listen. I have a feeling you'll pick it up quickly." He smiled at her, a genuine smile without any of the patronizing quality it had held when he first invited her on stage. "What do you say?" The audience held its collective breath, waiting for her answer. Hundreds of people who had come to see Anton Rivera, the world-famous pianist, were now equally interested in this unknown young woman who had appeared from nowhere with an extraordinary gift. May looked out at the sea of faces, then back at Rivera. Slowly, a smile spread across her face. "Okay," she said. "I'll try." The audience broke into applause once more as Rivera stood and offered his hand to help May up from the piano bench. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "please join us after a 15-minute intermission for what I promise will be a unique performance." As May walked off the stage, her legs still shaky but her heart lighter than it had been in years, she realized something important. Sometimes the most unexpected turns in life led to the most beautiful destinations. During the intermission, May sat in a small room backstage, her hands trembling slightly as she sipped water from a plastic cup. The walls were covered with framed photos of famous musicians who had performed in this hall over the years. Their confident smiles made her feel even more out of place. A gentle knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Rivera entered carrying a tablet. "How are you feeling?" he asked, pulling up a chair to sit across from her. "Like I might throw up," May admitted with a nervous laugh. "I've never played in front of anyone except my grandmother. And now there are hundreds of people out there." Rivera nodded understandingly. "Stage fright is normal even for professionals. I still get nervous before every performance." He held out the tablet. "I thought you might want to listen to the piece before we go on. The Moonlight Sonata is one of Beethoven's most beloved works." May took the tablet and the headphones he offered. As the music began to play, she closed her eyes. The famous opening notes washed over her, haunting, gentle, yet filled with an underlying sadness that tugged at her heart. She could almost see the notes floating in her mind, could feel her fingers itching to recreate the patterns they made. When the piece ended, she opened her eyes to find Rivera watching her with interest. "You weren't just listening," he observed. "You were playing it in your head, weren't you?" May nodded, surprised that he could tell. "Your fingers were moving slightly," he explained. "Many musicians do that. We can't help ourselves," he smiled. "Do you think you can play it?" "The beginning part, yes," May said. "But it gets complicated later. I might mess up." "Everyone messes up," Rivera said with a shrug. "Even me. The audience rarely notices if you keep going with confidence." He checked his watch. "We should head back. They'll be expecting us." As they walked toward the stage, May could hear the buzz of the crowd through the heavy curtains. Word had spread during intermission. The half-empty seats from the first part of the evening were now filled, with people standing along the walls as well. "So many people," May whispered, her panic rising again. Rivera patted her shoulder. "Don't think about them. When you play, it's just you and the music. Nothing else matters." The stage manager gave them a signal, and Rivera led the way onto the stage. The audience erupted in applause as they appeared, many people standing. May blinked in the bright lights, her heart hammering in her chest. Two grand pianos now stood center stage, positioned so the pianists could see each other. Rivera guided May to the one on the left before taking his place at the other. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said into the microphone, Thank you for your patience during the intermission. As promised, we have something special for you tonight." He gestured toward May. For those who joined us late, this remarkable young woman has never had a formal piano lesson in her life. Yet she has a gift that many trained musicians would envy: the ability to hear and reproduce music with extraordinary accuracy and feeling. The audience murmured in appreciation. Tonight, May will join me for Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. She heard it for the first time just minutes ago. He turned to her. "Are you ready?" May nodded, though ready was the last thing she felt. "I'll play the first movement," Rivera explained. "Listen carefully, and when I finish, you try. Then we'll play the second movement together as a duet. Don't worry if you make mistakes, just keep going." He positioned his hands over the keys and began to play. The familiar, gentle arpeggios filled the hall, the notes rising and falling like waves under moonlight. The audience was completely silent, many with their eyes closed, transported by the beauty of the music. May watched Rivera's hands move across the keyboard, memorizing the patterns they made. But more than that, she absorbed the feeling behind the notes, the melancholy, the yearning, the quiet acceptance. This was what her grandmother had taught her without words. Music wasn't just about hitting the right keys in the right order. It was about translating emotion into sound. When Rivera finished the first movement, he nodded to May. Taking a deep breath, she placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The opening notes came easily, her fingers finding the right keys without hesitation. She kept her touch light, letting the melody float above the steady rhythm of the left hand. As she played, she forgot about the audience, forgot about Rivera watching her, forgot about everything except the music flowing through her. Her version wasn't an exact copy of Rivera's. There were subtle differences in timing, in emphasis, in the way she lingered on certain notes. But these differences didn't detract from the performance, they made it uniquely hers, a personal interpretation rather than a mechanical reproduction. When she reached the end of the first movement, the audience remained silent, many listeners holding their breath. Rivera nodded at her with approval before turning to his own piano. "Now," he said quietly, "we play together. Follow my lead and trust your instincts." He began the second movement, which was lighter and more playful than the first. After a few measures, May joined in, her notes weaving around his in a musical conversation. When he played a phrase, she answered it. When he built toward a crescendo, she supported him with harmonies. They hadn't rehearsed this. They hadn't discussed who would play what parts. Yet somehow they found their way together through the music, anticipating each other's movements as if they had performed together for years. The audience watched in amazement as the young nursing student matched the world-famous pianist note for note, creating a duet that neither had planned but both now shaped together. In the middle of a particularly complex passage, May made a mistake, playing a wrong note that hung in the air. For a brief moment, panic flashed across her face. But then she remembered Rivera's advice and kept going, incorporating the mistake into a slightly altered version of the phrase. Rivera glanced at her and smiled, impressed by her recovery. He deliberately played the same wrong note in his next phrase, turning her error into a theme that they passed back and forth between them. The message was clear. In music, as in life, it wasn't about being perfect. It was about being authentic, about taking risks, about making something beautiful even from mistakes. As they approached the end of the movement, their playing became more synchronized, building toward a powerful conclusion. The final notes rang out together, perfect in their harmony before fading into silence. For a moment, no one moved. Then the audience rose as one, the applause thunderous. People shouted "Bravo" and "Encore." Flowers were thrown onto the stage. A woman in the front row was openly weeping. Rivera stood and bowed, then gestured for May to do the same. As she rose shakily from the piano bench and dipped into an awkward bow, the applause grew even louder. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rivera announced when the noise finally subsided, "what you have witnessed tonight is something truly special." May has never performed in public before. She has never studied music formally, yet she has just played one of the most challenging pieces in the classical repertoire, with the kind of understanding that many spend decades trying to achieve. He turned to May. "I believe what we have here is a rare talent that deserves to be nurtured." He addressed her directly now. "May, would you be willing to play one more piece for us? Something of your choosing?" May looked out at the expectant faces of the audience, then back at Rivera. The fear was still there, but something else was stronger now, a joy she hadn't felt since those childhood days at her grandmother's piano. There is one more piece I know, she said softly. Rivera gestured toward the piano with an encouraging smile. The stage is yours. As May sat down again, her mind went back to the last time she had seen her grandmother alive. The old woman had been too weak to play, but she had asked May to bring her favorite record and place it on the turntable beside her bed. This one, her grandmother had said, this one reminds me of home. It was Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, a piece of extraordinary complexity and emotional range. May had listened to it countless times after her grandmother's death, trying to capture its essence on the old upright piano before it was taken away. Now, sitting before a concert grand piano in a packed hall, May closed her eyes and began to play from memory. The opening notes were questioning, uncertain, like someone testing unfamiliar waters. Then the melody emerged, growing in confidence and complexity. The audience leaned forward in their seats, captivated. Rivera stood to the side, his expression a mixture of awe and professional assessment. He could hear the technical flaws in her playing, notes that weren't perfectly clean, passages where her lack of training showed. But he could also hear something many technically perfect pianists never achieved. A raw, honest emotional connection to the music that reached out and touched everyone in the room. As May continued to play, lost in her memories and the music, Rivera made a decision. When this concert was over, he would make some phone calls. This young woman needed a teacher, scholarships, opportunities. Talents like hers were too rare to go undeveloped. Tonight had begun as a routine performance in a series of hundreds. It had turned into something he would never forget, a reminder of why he had fallen in love with music in the first place. As the last notes of Chopin's ballade faded away, May opened her eyes. For a moment, the hall was completely silent. Then came a roar of applause so powerful it seemed to shake the building. People were on their feet, clapping wildly, shouting praise. An older gentleman in the front row threw a bouquet of roses onto the stage. May sat frozen at the piano, overwhelmed by the response. Rivera approached and gently took her hand, helping her to her feet. Together, they bowed to the audience. The applause continued for nearly 5 minutes, with people stamping their feet and calling for more. Finally, Rivera stepped forward to the microphone. Thank you all for witnessing something truly extraordinary tonight. I think we can all agree that we've been part of a very special moment in music. He turned to May. And thank you, May, for reminding us all why we fell in love with music in the first place. As they walked off stage, May felt lightheaded. Did that really happen? She whispered. Rivera laughed. It really did. And I have a feeling it's just the beginning for you. In the small backstage room, they found a crowd waiting. The concert hall director, several music critics, and a woman who introduced herself as the dean of the local conservatory all wanted to speak with May. How long have you been playing secretly? A reporter asked, notebook in hand. Where did you study before? Another questioned. I never studied anywhere, May repeated, feeling overwhelmed by the attention. I just played my grandmother's piano until it was sold. The conservatory dean, a stern-looking woman with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, regarded May with keen interest. You have an extraordinary gift, she said. Raw and unpolished, but exceptional nonetheless. We should talk about your future. Rivera stepped in, seeing May's discomfort with all the attention. Perhaps we could continue this another time, he suggested. It's been quite an evening. As the crowd reluctantly dispersed, Rivera handed May a business card. My personal number, he explained. Call me tomorrow. I have some ideas I'd like to discuss with you. May nodded, tucking the card carefully into her pocket. She felt as if she were in a dream, floating through experiences that couldn't possibly be real. When she finally made it back to her apartment, well past midnight, her roommate Lily was still up, surrounded by tissues and cough medicine. How was the boring concert? Lily asked, then stopped, noticing May's dazed expression. What happened? You look weird. May collapsed onto the sofa. I played the piano on stage. With Anton Rivera. Lily stared at her. You what? He asked for a volunteer from the audience and somehow picked me, and then I played and people liked it and… May broke off, the events of the evening suddenly catching up with her. To her surprise, she began to cry. Lily moved to sit beside her, concerned. Hey, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong, May said through her tears. It's just I felt close to my grandmother tonight. like she was there with me. And I realized how much I miss playing, how much I miss her. Lily put an arm around her shoulders. Tell me everything. So May did, recounting the whole unbelievable evening while Lily listened with wide eyes, occasionally interrupting with exclamations of disbelief. Look, Lily said finally, holding up her phone. You're all over social media already. Sure enough, videos of May's performance were spreading rapidly online. Comments poured in from viewers amazed by the unlikely story of a nursing student with hidden musical talent. This can't be real, May said, staring at the screen. Oh, it's real, Lily replied, and you're going viral. The next morning, May woke to find dozens of messages on her phone. Friends from nursing school had seen the videos. Local news stations wanted interviews. And there was a text from Rivera. Breakfast? We have much to discuss. I'll send a car at 9. Bleary-eyed and still feeling as if she were in a dream, May got ready. At precisely 9 a.m., a sleek black car pulled up outside her apartment building. The driver took her to a small cafe in an elegant part of town she'd never visited before. Rivera was waiting at a corner table, reading something on his tablet. He stood when he saw her. Ah, our star has arrived, he said warmly. How are you feeling this morning? Like I imagined everything, May admitted as she sat down. Rivera smiled. I assure you it was very real. Half the music world is talking about you today. He turned his tablet around to show her an article from a prestigious music magazine. The headline read, Unknown pianist stuns audience at charity concert. This is crazy, May said, shaking her head. This is opportunity, Rivera corrected her. He set the tablet aside and leaned forward. May, what are your plans for the future? She blinked, caught off guard by the question. Finish nursing school, I guess. Get a job at the hospital. And is that what you want? Truly want? May hesitated. Before last night, she had never questioned her path. Nursing was practical, stable. It would allow her to support herself and maybe someday help pay back her mother for all the sacrifices she'd made raising May alone. I don't know, she admitted. I never thought I had options. Rivera nodded understandingly. Let me tell you what I see. I see someone with extraordinary natural talent. Yes, you lack training. Your technique needs work. Your fingering is all wrong and you have no formal knowledge of music theory. But those things can be taught. He tapped the table for emphasis. What you have, that innate understanding of music, that emotional connection that cannot be taught. Many spend their lives trying to achieve what comes naturally to you. May felt her cheeks grow warm at the praise. So what are you suggesting? I've spoken with the dean of the conservatory. They're prepared to offer you a full scholarship starting immediately. May's mouth fell open. But I'm in the middle of nursing school. I have student loans. I can't just... The scholarship would cover your living expenses, Rivera explained. And as for your current loans, there are foundations that support musicians. I sit on the board of several. We could make arrangements. May's head was spinning. This is too much. Too fast. Rivera's expression softened. I understand. It's a lot to take in. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. This is for you, regardless of what you decide. May opened it to find a check with more zeros than she had ever seen in her bank account. Your share of last night's ticket sales, Rivera explained. The second half sold out after intermission largely because of you. I can't accept this, May protested. You earned it, Rivera insisted. And there's more. He slid a folder across the table. These are invitations. A music festival in Vienna, a special performance at Carnegie Hall, a recording session with the National Symphony. May stared at the documents, unable to process what she was seeing. These are for me? People want to hear you play, May. Your story is compelling, yes, but it's your talent that has everyone talking. Rivera leaned back in his chair. I'm not suggesting you abandon your nursing studies if that's truly your passion. But I'm asking you to consider that perhaps your grandmother left you with more than just memories. Perhaps she left you with a gift meant to be shared with the world. May thought about the old upright piano, about the hours she had spent beside her grandmother, learning by watching, by listening, by feeling the music rather than reading it. She had never considered those moments as training. They were just precious. Memories of the woman who had helped raise her while her mother worked double shifts. I don't know if I'm good enough, she said quietly. That, Rivera said with a smile, is the only thing you've said today that I know for certain is wrong. He pulled out his phone and showed her more comments and reactions to the videos of her performance. Professional musicians praising her natural musicality. Ordinary listeners describing how her playing had moved them to tears. A comment from a renowned piano teacher who wrote, "In 40 years of teaching, I have never seen such raw, untrained talent. This young woman plays from her soul." "The conservatory classes start next month," Rivera said, putting his phone away. "You have time to think, to decide what you want your life to be." May ran her fingers along the edge of the table as if it were a keyboard. Last night had awakened something in her. A joy she had almost forgotten, a connection to her past, a possible future she had never imagined. "What would my grandmother say?" she wondered aloud. Rivera smiled. "I think you already know the answer to that. You played it for us last night." As they finished their breakfast, May's phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. It was a national morning show wanting to interview her. Then another call came, a famous pianist who had seen her video and wanted to meet her. Then the conservatory dean, asking when she could tour the facilities. The world she had known just 24 hours ago was changing with dizzying speed. May looked at Rivera, feeling both terrified and exhilarated. "What happens now?" she asked. Rivera smiled. "Now, May, you decide. But whatever you choose, remember what you felt last night at that piano. Some people search their whole lives and never find what lights them up inside like that." He stood and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Your grandmother gave you a rare gift. The question is, what will you do with it?" As they left the cafe, May noticed people glancing at her, a few pointing discreetly. Someone whispered, "That's her, the piano girl from the video." 24 hours ago, she had been an ordinary nursing student with mounting debt and an uncertain future. Now she stood at a crossroads, with paths opening before her that she had never dreamed possible. And somewhere, she felt certain, her grandmother was smiling. 3 months had passed since that life-changing night at the concert hall. May stood at the window of her new apartment, watching the sun rise over the city. In the corner of the living room sat a baby grand piano, a gift from an anonymous donor who had been moved by her story. Her phone buzzed with a message from her mother. "Don't forget to eat breakfast before your big day. So proud of you. Love you," May smiled. Her mother had been surprisingly supportive of her decision to put nursing school on hold. "Your grandmother always said you had music in your soul," she had told May. "Maybe this is the path you were meant to follow all along." The past 3 months had been a whirlwind. After much thought, May had accepted the conservatory's scholarship offer. Her days were now filled with formal training, learning to read music, understanding theory, correcting the improper techniques she had developed on her own. It was harder than she had expected, humbling to realize how much she didn't know. But her teachers were patient, understanding that her gift was unique. "We're not trying to change how you play," her main instructor had explained. "We're giving you the tools to express what you already feel inside." Rivera had kept his promise to help, becoming a mentor and friend. He had arranged for her to have access to practice rooms, introduced her to influential people in the music world, and even helped her mother find a better job with more flexible hours so she could occasionally travel to see May perform. Today marked an important milestone, May's first official recital as a conservatory student. It wouldn't be in a grand concert hall, but in a small auditorium at the school. Still, tickets had sold out within hours of being announced. People were curious about the miracle pianist whose videos had now been viewed millions of times online. May's phone buzzed again, this time a message from Lily. "Your old roomie will be front row center." Break a leg. May appreciated the support, but as the day progressed, her nervousness grew. This wasn't like the night with Rivera, when she had played without expectations. Now people were coming specifically to hear her. What if she disappointed them? By late afternoon, as she prepared to leave for the conservatory, her hands were shaking. She sat at her piano, trying to calm herself with a few notes, but even the familiar melodies felt wrong somehow. There was a knock at her door. To her surprise, Rivera stood there, elegant as always in a dark suit. "I thought you were in Europe," May said as she let him in. "I flew back early. Couldn't miss your debut." He studied her face. "You're terrified," May nodded, unable to hide it. "What if I freeze? What if they realize I don't belong there?" Rivera led her to the sofa and sat beside her. "Do you know what imposter syndrome is?" May shook her head. It's the feeling that you're a fraud, that you don't deserve your success, that someday everyone will realize you've been faking it all along. He smiled gently. Even the greatest musicians feel it sometimes. I still do after all these years. But you've earned your place, May protested. You've studied your whole life. And you have a gift that can't be studied for, Rivera countered. Listen to me, May. Music isn't about perfect technique or knowing every theory. Those things matter, yes, but they're just tools. What touches people is the emotion, the story you tell through the notes. He took her hands in his. Your hands, remember? Trust them. May took a deep breath, trying to absorb his words. I have something for you, Rivera said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small, worn photograph and handed it to her. May gasped softly. It was a picture of a young Asian woman seated at a piano, her expression serene as her fingers hovered above the keys. The image was faded, the corners bent with age. How did you? Your mother helped me find it, Rivera explained. That's your grandmother, isn't it? In her younger days. May nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She had never seen this photograph before. Look at her hands, Rivera said softly. The position, the grace. You play exactly the same way, he smiled. When I first saw you at the piano that night, something seemed familiar. Now I understand why. May stared at the photograph, seeing the resemblance Rivera had noticed. The way her grandmother held her wrists, the slight angle of her fingers. These were the very things May's teachers had been trying to correct, calling them improper technique. Did you know she was trained? Rivera asked. May looked up in surprise. What? Your mother told me. Your grandmother was a concert pianist in China before the Cultural Revolution. When music was denounced as bourgeois, she had to give it up. She never spoke of that time again, not even to her family. Rivera's voice was gentle. When she came to America, she brought her music inside her. And somehow she passed it to you. Tears filled May's eyes as pieces of her past shifted into new patterns. The old records her grandmother had played. The way she would close her eyes when certain melodies filled the room. The hours spent showing May how to position her hands on the keys without ever explaining why it mattered. She never told me, May whispered. Some pains are too deep for words, Rivera said. But she gave you her gift, May. Perhaps that was her way of keeping her music alive. May clutched the photograph, feeling a new connection to the woman who had shaped her childhood. I wish she could see me play tonight, Rivera smiled. I think she will, in a way. He stood and checked his watch. Now we should go. Your audience is waiting. As they drove to the conservatory, May kept the photograph in her hand, drawing strength from it. The backstage area was buzzing with activity when they arrived. Other students wished her luck. Teachers gave last-minute advice. And the program director reminded everyone of the order of performances. May would be last, the featured student of the evening. From behind the curtain, she could hear the auditorium filling up. Peeking through a small gap, she saw her mother taking a seat in the front row beside Lily. Several of her former nursing classmates were there too, along with many faces she didn't recognize. The recital began. One by one, talented students performed pieces they had rehearsed for months. May listened appreciatively, but also felt her anxiety building. Each performer seemed so polished, so prepared. Her 3 months of formal training seemed woefully inadequate in comparison. Finally, it was her turn. The program director introduced her with a brief mention of her unusual discovery and meteoric rise in the music world. As May walked onto the stage, the applause was enthusiastic, tinged with curiosity. The spotlight felt hot as she took her seat at the grand piano. She placed her grandmother's photograph on the edge of the piano where she could see it. Then she looked out at the audience, her heart racing. Her mother smiled encouragingly. Lily gave a discreet thumbs up. Rivera, now seated in the back row, nodded slightly. May had chosen to play Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the same piece she had continued when Rivera first invited her on stage 3 months ago. It seemed fitting to begin her new journey where the old one had started. As she positioned her hands over the keys, she suddenly remembered something her grandmother used to say when May was struggling with a difficult passage. Close your eyes. Let your fingers find the music. May closed her eyes. The audience disappeared. The pressure vanished. In her mind, she was a child again, sitting beside her grandmother on the old piano bench. Watching those weathered hands create magic, she began to play. The notes flowed like water, each one leading naturally to the next. Her newly acquired knowledge of theory and technique merged with her innate understanding of the music's emotional landscape. She played not just with her hands but with her heart, telling the story of a grandmother's legacy, a hidden past, a gift passed down through generations. When she opened her eyes at the end of the piece, she saw her mother wiping away tears. Rivera was smiling broadly. The entire audience sat in reverent silence for a moment before erupting into applause. As May stood to take her bow, she felt a sense of rightness, of having found her place in the world. The path ahead would not be easy. There was still so much to learn, so many techniques to master. But tonight had confirmed what Rivera had told her from the beginning. Her connection to music was real and valuable. After the recital, as well-wishers crowded around to congratulate her, a distinguished older gentleman approached. He introduced himself as the director of an international piano competition. "We would be honored if you would consider participating next year," he said. "You have something special, something that can't be taught." May thanked him, still overwhelmed by the evening's success. As the crowd thinned, she found herself standing with her mother, Lily, and Rivera. "What did I tell you?" Rivera said, beaming with pride. "You were magnificent." "I felt her with me," May said softly, clutching the photograph. "My grandmother." It was like she was guiding my hands. Her mother squeezed her arm. "She would be so proud, May. So proud to see her music living on through you." As they left the conservatory together, May looked up at the night sky. Stars glittered overhead, distant but bright like the notes of a nocturne against the dark. 3 months ago, she had been a nursing student with a secret love of music. Today, she was at the beginning of a journey she had never imagined possible. There would be challenges ahead, more recitals, competitions, perhaps even international performances. The road would not always be smooth, but she would travel it with her grandmother's spirit beside her, with her mother's support, with Rivera's guidance, and with the music that had been inside her all along, waiting for its chance to be heard. Sometimes the most unexpected moments in life, like being called onto a stage as a joke, lead to the most beautiful destinations. And sometimes, the gifts we carry inside us are just waiting for the right moment to change everything.